In 1877, this man died in a small bedroom in Manhattan. He was 82 years old, hard of hearing, his body was failing him. But when he took his last breath, he was the richest person in the United States of America. His name was Cornelius Vanderbilt, and the fortune he left behind, adjusted for today's dollars, was worth over $200 billion. That's more than Bill Gates, more than Mark Zuckerberg, more than the entire royal family of England. Now look at this. This is the Breakers, the most famous Vanderbilt mansion ever built. 70 rooms, marble shipped from Italy, gold leaf on the ceilings. And by 2018, the last living Vanderbilt family member who lived inside this house was evicted. In just 3 generations, one of the greatest fortunes in human history completely vanished. How does that even happen? How do you take $200 billion and lose every single penny in less than 100 years? Today, you're going to find out. You're going to hear the real story of how the Vanderbilt family, once the most powerful dynasty in American history, destroyed themselves from the inside. And by the end of this video, you'll know the 3 brutal mistakes that every wealthy family still makes today. The first lesson, it cost the Vanderbilts everything. Welcome to MogulMemo. Let's begin. The year is 1810. A young boy named Cornelius Vanderbilt is sitting in a small ferry boat off the coast of Staten Island, New York. He's 11 years old. He's already dropped out of school, and while other boys his age are playing in the streets, Cornelius is rowing passengers across New York Harbor for pennies. He had nothing. His parents were Dutch immigrants. They lived in a tiny farmhouse. There was no inheritance waiting for him, no rich uncle, no college education. What he had was something rarer. He had ambition. By age 16, Cornelius asked his mother for $100. He told her, "Mama, if you give me this money, I'll buy my own boat, and I'll pay you back 10 times over." She gave it to him. He bought a small sailing vessel, and he went to work. While other ferry operators slept, Cornelius worked. While they raised their prices, Cornelius cut his. While they took weekends off, Cornelius worked 7 days a week. People started calling him the Commodore, a nickname that would stick with him for the rest of his life. By the time he was 40 years old, Cornelius Vanderbilt didn't just own one ferry, he owned a fleet. By 50, he controlled most of the steamboat traffic on the Hudson River. But here's where the real story begins. In 1864, when Cornelius was already a multimillionaire, at an age when most men retire, he made a decision that would change America forever. He sold all of his ships, and he bet everything he had on a new technology: railroads. Cornelius understood something that nobody else did at the time. The future of America wasn't going to be built on water. It was going to be built on iron. He bought the New York Central Railroad. Then he bought another, and another. By 1869, he controlled the most powerful railroad empire in the United States. He built Grand Central Station, the same station that still stands in Manhattan today, more than 150 years later. When Cornelius Vanderbilt died in 1877, his fortune was so large, it equaled almost 1 out of every $20 circulating in the entire United States economy. Let me say that again. 1 out of every $20 in the entire country was sitting in his bank account. He was the richest American who had ever lived, and he had just one job left to do: pass it on. On his deathbed, Cornelius gave 95% of his entire fortune to one person, his son, William Henry Vanderbilt. Everyone else in the family, the daughters, the grandchildren, the cousins, got almost nothing. Some got just $5,000. Cornelius believed in something simple. He believed money should stay concentrated. that if you split it up too much, it disappears. For one generation, he was right. William doubled the family fortune in just 9 years. By 1885, the Vanderbilts were worth, adjusted for today's money, over $400 billion. The family was untouchable, or so they thought. Now, I want you to imagine something. It's 1883, New York City. A woman named Alva Vanderbilt is throwing a ball. Not just any ball. She rents out a 6-story mansion she just built on Fifth Avenue. She hires 1,200 guests. She brings in flowers from Paris. She orders 10,000 pink roses for one single evening. The total cost, in today's dollars, is over $6 million for one party. Alva had a goal that night. She wanted to humiliate a rival, Caroline Astor, the most powerful socialite in America, and she did. After that party, the Vanderbilts weren't just rich, they were royalty. They built mansions up and down Fifth Avenue. They built castles in Newport. They built summer homes in North Carolina, the size of small cities. The Biltmore Estate, built by Cornelius's grandson George, is still the largest privately owned house in America today. But here's what you need to understand. While the Vanderbilts were partying, something dangerous was happening underneath the surface. The grandchildren, Cornelius's grandchildren, never knew what struggle was. They were born into mansions. They were raised by nannies. They were sent to Europe for finishing. They never had to build anything. They never had to earn anything. They never even had to manage the family business, because there was always someone hired to do it for them. And this is where the rot started. You see, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Commodore, he came from nothing. He understood the value of a single dollar. His son William respected the wealth, even if he didn't build it himself. But the third generation only knew how to spend it. Cornelius's grandson, Cornelius Vanderbilt II, built a 70-room mansion called the Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island. Cost over $400 million in today's money for a summer home. Another grandson, William Kissam Vanderbilt, built a yacht so large that the British Royal Navy used it as inspiration for their warships. Another grandson built his own private railway car with marble bathrooms. And another, Reggie Vanderbilt, gambled away over $70 million in today's money at a single horse track in one lifetime. By 1920, the Vanderbilt fortune was already cracking. The mansions were costing more to maintain than they generated. The grandchildren weren't investing, they were consuming. But the family still believed they were untouchable. They still believed the money would last forever. They were wrong. In 1929, the Great Depression hit, and the Vanderbilts, for the first time in 3 generations, had to face reality. The mansions started selling, the yachts went to auction, the grand parties stopped. But here's the most painful part. Most of them didn't even know how to handle it. They had never balanced a checkbook. They had never negotiated a deal. They had never said the word no to themselves in their entire lives. By 1947, just 70 years after Cornelius died as the richest man in America, there was a Vanderbilt family reunion held in New York City. Over 120 family members showed up. Not a single one was a millionaire. Not one. Let that sink in. The richest family in American history, with a fortune so massive it equaled 5% of the entire US economy. And 70 years later, not one descendant had even $1 million to their name. But the story isn't over, because the final chapter is the saddest of all. In 1934, A 10-year-old girl named Gloria Vanderbilt found herself at the center of one of the biggest scandals in American history. Her father, a Vanderbilt heir, had drunk himself to death years earlier. Her mother was unfit to raise her, and her relatives were fighting in court over what was left of her trust fund. The newspapers called it the trial of the century. The judge eventually awarded little Gloria to her aunt. She would later say in an interview, "I was the loneliest little girl in America." That little girl, Gloria, grew up. She became a fashion designer, a writer, an actress, and she did something none of her relatives had been able to do for generations. She built her own money. She made millions selling Gloria Vanderbilt jeans in the 1980s. She wrote best-selling books. But here's what she said about her family inheritance. And pay attention, because this is the line that says it all. She said, and I'm quoting her, "I've never believed in inherited wealth. I've never given my children any." She had 2 sons. One of them is a man you may know. His name is Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper, the famous CNN journalist, is the great-great-great-grandson of Cornelius Vanderbilt. He is, by direct bloodline, an heir to one of the largest fortunes ever built in human history. And in his own words, when his mother died in 2019, he inherited about $1.5 million. That's it. From a fortune that, at its peak, was worth over $400 billion in today's money. Anderson Cooper, to his credit, has spoken openly about this. He even wrote a book about it. He says the Vanderbilt story is a cautionary tale of how a family lost everything. And he's right. In 2018, the very last Vanderbilt family member who still lived inside the breakers was evicted by the Newport Preservation Society. The mansion is now a museum. You can buy a ticket, walk through the rooms, and nobody, not a single Vanderbilt descendant, has the money to live in their own family home anymore. The greatest American dynasty is over. But why? How does this happen? The answer is brutal, and it applies to every wealthy family alive today.